remember actually the sun was shining. I was walking the dog. You were cycling through Hyde Park, through
Regent's Park.
Regent's Park with giraffes looking at you, and we put a shout out for anyone who's actually attended Woodstock. And the lady who was listening was a lady called Jazz Lee, whose father was Alvin Lee, the main guy for 10 years after, and she hooked me up with Loraine, who was Alvin's partner from
63 till 73, 10
60
years.
73, and actually attended Woodstock. So
wow.
This is all your doing.
Well, all our doing, collectively.
Doing, yes.
The Robert Elms Show listenership. So I'll come on to you in a second, Loraine, but let's just, why have you picked Woodstock the movie for this kind of big event?
Well, we have this film club where we rent a cinema and we show a great film that's got music attached to it, modern popular culture attached to it, and we get somebody in who's involved with the film to do a Q&A. And we did, we've done High Fidelity with Nick Hornby, we've done Quadrophenia with Phil Daniels, and this is the 50th anniversary of a life-changing event. I mean, there's no other festival, as far as I'm aware, that's had a generation named after it. I don't think anyone's going to be calling themselves, I'm part of the Barclay Card Summer in Hyde Park generation. It's a few years ago I actually tried getting a documentary together, tried producing a documentary about Woodstock, and not the film itself, but it's the ripple effect of those 3 days. I mean, we're talking 3 days 50 years ago, and people still talk about it. And as I started getting deeper and deeper in this, I realised so many things happened in 1969. There was a kind of an event that happened in 1969, virtually on a weekly basis, that people still talk about. The maiden flight of Concorde, Johnny Yoko's bedding, Paul McCartney getting married, Richard Nixon becoming president, Brian Jones dying, the Stones at Hyde Park, the Midnight Cowboy.
Great film.
Apparently, according to my limited research, it is still the only X-rated film that's ever won an Oscar.
Wow.
Really?
And, of course, the moon landing. And so it goes on and on and on. All these things that happened in 1969. Sharon Tate murders, the Beatles released their last album, the last gig of the Beatles on the roof, and so on and so on and so on. So it was a year of real change.
Right. That was the year that was, and that was the year of the Woodstock Festival, and someone who was there was Loraine Burgon. Tell us the story of how you got there, Loraine. How did it happen?
Well, we were on tour in America.
That's 10 years after.
10 years after, yeah. And I was with Alvin. And we would...
So were you in the band at that point?
No.
No,
I was his...
Muse.
all those things. Well, actually, I used to make his clothes and cut his hair and, all those things that the old ladies of rock and rollers did for them in those days. And so the tour had started on July 4th in Newport, Rhode Island, where they were at the Newport Jazz Festival. It was the only year that they had rock bands at the Newport Jazz Festival, because it got way too out of hand for them. They couldn't cope with it. And so we were in New York, and we were starting to hear how there was this festival that was going to happen in upstate New York. And the basis behind it was that they were going to put on every English band that was on tour in America that summer. That was
I had no idea that it was based around kind of the British bands.
Well, that was the big reason for why it was the summer and why they picked on all the English bands. Yeah, I mean, of course, there's all the American bands like Jefferson Airplane, Janis Joplin, all those people were also part of it. Of course they were. So it wasn't totally English. But to get as many of the English bands as possible was what they thought would be the draw,
right.
Which of course it was, but it didn't. It turned out to be a draw way further than they ever expected it to be. The night before, so we were just in the middle of a tour, so we knew that Woodstock was coming up, but actually we were in St. Louis the night before.
And did you think of it as a big thing? Did you have any sense of the scale of it? By that point
we did, because it was on the national news.
Right.
So this was on the Saturday night, because 10 Years After played on the Sunday. So it was the Sunday when we were there, which was the day of the big storm. But on the Friday and the Saturday, we'd been watching it on the television news in the hotel rooms, because it was now the main news item on the national news in America, was this festival, because the roads had been closed down and there were thinking about declaring it, sending in the National Guard. They declared it a national emergency.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, what a lot of people don't realise about Woodstock, I mean, the backstory is fascinating about how they came to get the money together to do it. But what a lot of people don't realise is the location changed three
right.
times before they actually found someone to do it.
That's right.
They anticipated, if I get back to my facts right,
200,000.
they anticipated 200,000, although they told the authorities they reckon they had about 50 to 80,000, yes. So,
right.
They got away with murder.
How many actually turned up?
Well, 500,000 people turned up, plus another 500,000 were trying to get there. So it completely rammed, locked up the whole of upstate New York.
Yep.
And there was, we see this in the film. It's that the whole place was just a car park. Thousands
How
of people.
did you get there?
We left St. Louis was where they were the night before. That was also part of the jazz festival that had been Newport, and it was all jazz players like Miles Davis, and 10 years after went on after Nina Simone.
Right.
And it was an amazing gig that was, because it was an all-black audience. And I remember an old boy from the front row getting up. Alvin had trousers that had fringes around the bottom. This guy ambled to the stage and was feeling the fringe on his trousers while he was playing guitar. And Alvin told me right near the end of his life, he still remembered that guy's face.
Wow.
Yeah, really, because it was that kind of an energy that was going on at the time. So we got up at 5 o'clock in the morning in St. Louis, and we got a flight to New York. And then we had limousines take us up to about 5 miles away from the actual site.
Because lots of bands couldn't get there, could they? They got stuck in the morass.
Yes, exactly. Well, we got as close as we could to this Holiday Inn that had been taken over by all the hippies. There wasn't that was, for me, was complete magic. You open the door of the Holiday Inn, and inside it was wall-to-wall hippies, behind the desk and everywhere. And outside, on the big board that they have outside Holiday Inns, it said Tranquility Base, which was right back to the Apollo moon landing.
Right, yeah, Sea of Tranquility.
Oh, yeah, exactly, where they landed. It's very emotional for me to remember those things. It was such an intense experience. And we'd seen it on the news for 2 nights, so we couldn't wait to get there.
So were all the bands staying together? Or?
Well, they weren't staying. They were just passing through, because by this point, they were having to fly them in on a helicopter. So this was where they were getting people together to put them in a helicopter. So, and this guy hippie guy came up and said, right, this is what happens. The bands go in on a helicopter, they play, they come back out again, and the old ladies stay here. And I said to Alvin, took him off to one side, I said,
I'm not having that.
Wait a minute. I've been watching this on the news for days. Are you kidding me? So he says to the guy, look, if she doesn't get there, I'm not going on, which was just what you want to hear at that moment. Yeah. So anyway, the band went off in a helicopter, and then there was me and the drummer's wife with Ruth Ann, and we just kept grabbing this guy every time we walked by, and eventually the guy gave in and took us up to the helicopter pad and put us on a Chinook helicopter with the medics. And we set off, and everybody tells the same story. The way in on the helicopter was up and then over the hill where this whole crowd is down on the ground below you. And of course, with the Chinooks, there's an opening there. You can see out, and you could see this whole crowd. And you could smell the marijuana. Oh, smell this.
No, you can smell that when you say that.
Yeah, you smell the smoke from the crowd. And the crowd
literally in the air in a helicopter.
The crowd was smoking. Yeah. And
That's an extraordinary story.
So, but what happened when we got there? The band then started to get ready to go on, and there's this huge storm comes about. Joe Cocker played
Right.
While we were there. And then this enormous storm just broke like some biblical epic. Well, there was no way they could put any bands on. There was just a few tarpaulins over the top of the stage.
There would have been no cricket whatsoever.
No,
I'm very surprised I wasn't there.
And there was nothing backstage by this point. There was no food. There was maybe some water or something like that. You couldn't get cigarettes. After a few hours, we'd run out of cigarettes because it's supposed to be a 2 or 3 hour job. We ended up being there 18 hours.
Wow. Did they get to play?
Yes.
Right.
But not till 8:15 in the evening because of the storm. And Country Joe and the Fish had managed to sneak on the stage before them after the storm. But during the storm, we were in the back of U-Haul trucks. just standing around.
So what did the audience
getting
do
high.
during this biblical
They were
downpouring?
singing. They were singing "Let the Sun Shine In," and it was very moving. The audience really lifted everybody's spirits because by this point, that was what was needed. But the audience were completely solid.
Wow.
It was. They were amazing because they'd put up with. And the movie is great to see. I have to tell you, if anybody hasn't seen it.
Do you know, I don't think I've ever seen it.
Right. Well, it won an Academy Award for Best Documentary that year.
Scorsese was involved,
He
wasn't he?
Scorsese was involved. It was nominated for 3 Oscars and it
Yep.
won 1, which was really unusual for a documentary. And
Yep.
Scorsese and a lady
Schumacher, Thelma Schumacher.
who was his right-hand
Yeah,
woman
all
and
the
still
years.
is, was the editor on it.
Yeah. So did he direct it, or was he assistant
No,
director?
it
Or
was a
something?
guy called Michael Wadham, I think, who
Mike
directed it.
Wadley.
Wadley, yes, who directed it.
Yeah.
But it is an amazing film. And the opening shot, and you can see it on the trailer, of the helicopter flying over the crowd is unbelievable. And it was, you know, it kind of like broke the mould for festivals. But, and maybe not in a good way, but because of the rain and the crowds and that, and there was no food and like,
No,
you know,
no, no.
medics were
Everybody
there, and
expects to get wet at festivals.
but it
Come
was
on,
but they were completely overwhelmed because it was meant to be a money-making venture, and the fences went down within a couple of hours and became a free
Yeah.
festival. And I mean, there's so many great stories about it. Like Jimi Hendrix went on like
9 o'clock in the morning.
9
on
o'clock in the
Monday
morning.
'cause his contract said he was going to be the headliner. Whatever happened, he was going to be the headliner. And they tried to persuade his manager to let him go on earlier. You know, no, he was going to be the headliner, which turned out to be 9 o'clock on Monday morning.
and a lot of people had gone home.
Gone to work. They had to get out to try and get back to New York to go to work.
He played to about 30,000 people. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like over
Yeah.
3/4 had gone home.
Yeah.
Have you watched the film recently?
I've watched it maybe 3 years ago, yeah, but I've only ever seen it on, small screen or on a TV, but I haven't seen it on the big screen since
It came out. I guess.
Yeah, since 1970. And actually, it had a limited release in 1970 on 70mm.
Right.
And when we were at the premiere in New York, and then when we came back to London, it was on at the Empire in Leicester Square, I think the Empire or the Odeon, whichever one
Had the big
2001
screen,
was
yeah,
at,
right.
on the 70mm screen. So Alvin and I had a smoke and we went down there to watch it on the big screen with the big sound. So that was very cool. I mean, it was an extraordinary experience. The thing about the film was, so they'd shot all this footage and they got just one guy who was going around just talking to people in the crowd.
Yeah.
And then they got people out in the local town talking to the local people. So it really was a documentary. It really became a story of the whole event.
It's a bit like Jazz on a Summer's Day, which had kind of preceded it as a jazz film, hadn't it?
Yeah, that's right. But on a much, much bigger scale, because what happened after the festival, when everybody had seen on the news what it was going to be all about, then Warner Brothers came in and said, look, we will give you our up to the moment editing suite, and if we can have the film. Well, I mean, they did a deal. But so that's what happened. So Mike Wadley and Scorsese and Schumacher, they were there working, and what they discovered was that they had all these split screen options to do, and that's what they did. So they took the footage, and it's so you don't just see.
I mean,
the
it's kind of
central
its
screen.
time in that sense, isn't it?
It's-
Very much.
Yes. Yes, well, it set the mould for an awful lot that came afterwards.